Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of In the Kitchen with Carly. I just got back from a really fun bachelorette trip. We traveled all over Mount Zion, Grand Canyon, Sedona, Scottsdale. So much fun. I've been gone for a week and my body is craving some healthy veggies tonight for dinner. A home cooked meal, healthy veggies, can't wait. I'm gonna show you guys how to make a spaghetti squash primavera. So instead of a pasta primavera, we're just swapping out the pasta. We're gonna use spaghetti squash. It'll be full of some nice hearty vegetables, lots of garlic, tons of basil, full of flavor. I think you'll really enjoy it. So let's check out all the ingredients that we're gonna need and we'll throw this dish together. All right, so most importantly, you need your spaghetti squash. That's what we're gonna get started first. For the seasonings in this recipe, you'll need olive oil. I like to put some adobo seasoning on there. I have oregano and basil. I also use fresh basil. Some salt and pepper just in case. Parmesan cheese. You'll need your cherry tomatoes, asparagus, a head of broccoli. You'll need a zucchini, just one, and then another yellow squash. You will also need an onion. I like to use lots of garlic, so I have 3 cloves. I may add in a 4th. And you will also need fresh basil. First things first, we're gonna cut up our spaghetti squash. I have my oven heated at 425. We're gonna roast the spaghetti squash while we are chopping up our other vegetables. I like to cut my spaghetti squash in circles, little rounds like this, about, I would say maybe like an inch thick, maybe 2 inches thick. I think it roasts better. So I'm gonna cut them up into little circles like this, and we will scrape out the seeds from the inside. Definitely get yourself a sharp knife. Spaghetti squash can be difficult to cut up, but like I said, I like to cut them in rounds like this. Now we're gonna scrape out the center here, coat them in some olive oil, and put them on the roasting tray. Okay, the center is all scooped out. We've got them lined up on the tray. We're gonna coat them with olive oil. Okay, I like to just brush it all around there, make sure it gets coated nice and evenly. I don't want the spaghetti squash to over roast. Now we are going to roast the spaghetti squash at 425 for probably about 10 minutes. Then we'll check on it with a fork and make sure that it's, easily pierced with a fork. In the meantime, we are gonna go ahead and start chopping up all of our vegetables. First, we're gonna start with the asparagus. You wanna cut them into little bite-sized pieces. Obviously, you wanna get rid of the bitter end. So I usually cut them probably a good halfway up there. You want to make sure you get rid of all this tough fibrous stem here. Okay, as you can see, the stems are gone. I then cut the remainder of the asparagus in half so we have more bite-sized pieces. I'm going to add it into our wooden mixing bowl over here. Next, let's chop up our broccoli. Okay, so we rinsed our broccoli and now we are de-stemming our broccoli as well. So you have the whole stem here, and I always just kind of cut up by the floret. And now we will make these thicker florets. We're gonna chop them in half and make them nice and thin. Okay, we chopped up all the broccoli florets. Some of the thicker ones, as you can see here, we just cut them in half. You want them all to be about the same thickness so that they roast evenly on your cookie sheet. We're now gonna add these into our mixing bowl with the asparagus. Next, we are going to chop up the zucchini. I always start by cutting the ends off of the zucchini and then I cut it in half like this. Now we are going to, I don't think I can hold it and do this with one hand, but now we are going to cut them up into thin slices this way. Ta-da! Zucchini's chopped up. And guess where it's going? Whoop, right into the bowl with the rest of our veggies. Next up is our yellow squash. We're gonna start by cutting the ends off and then cutting it in half, just like we did our zucchini. Okay, so I went to go cut this in half and I cut it a little unevenly. See how this piece is a lot thinner than this side? Got a little crazy there. So what I did to make it even thickness is I cut it in half again. So this side is actually gonna be in fours. This one I'm gonna keep in half since it'll be much thinner. We're gonna chop these up into slices and add them to the bowl. Here we go, they're going in. Next up is our onion, woo woo. Okay, we got rid of all that crunchy skin on the outside of the onion. Now we cut it in half and we're gonna slice it into about 1-inch thick slices and add it to the bowl. Okay, see how we cut these up, but we left them relatively thick. I mean, I would say they're about the width of my finger. You don't want to chop these up too thin because when you add them into your vegetables and you start roasting them, you don't want them to overcook. All right, guys, it's been about 10 minutes. I just checked on the spaghetti squash. It looks about done. How I test it is you can poke a fork through the edges of your spaghetti squash nice and easily. So we are going to set this aside, let it cool, and I'll be back later when our vegetables are roasting to show you how we shred the spaghetti squash. Now we're gonna throw in our tomatoes. You definitely want a decent amount of the tomatoes. When they roast and kind of pop open, they're gonna create the sauce for your spaghetti squash. So don't be afraid to add those on in there. Okay, last but not least, we've got the garlic and our basil. I went ahead and washed and de-stemmed my basil. I peeled the skin off of this clove. I'm gonna do the same with these two, and then I'm gonna grate the garlic onto our bowl of vegetables. So one of my favorite ways, instead of chopping the garlic, I like to grate it. I think it really opens up the flavor of the garlic, and it helps to coat all these vegetables more evenly when it's a grated paste. So I'm just gonna use the medium fine grate on my cheese grater, and we're gonna go ahead and grate up our garlic. Okay, as you can see, we grated all of our garlic, and it kind of creates a shredded paste here. Oops, it's a little blurry. Let me see if I can focus that. So we're gonna go ahead and spread it kind of around on the vegetables. When we mix in the seasonings and toss it up, it'll coat these veggies really nicely. Last but not least is our basil. So I'm gonna take about half of my basil pile here. Comes out to about a full handful. I'm gonna chop this up to add into the veggie bowl as we season it. And then I'm gonna save half for topping it once the pasta is done. I want the fresh basil to top it with. All right, basil is chopped. Let's go ahead and add this on in here. Might need 2 hands to scoop that. Okay, next we're gonna throw on some seasoning. I really like to add adobo seasoning to my vegetables. So we're gonna coat some there. Next, I'm gonna sprinkle on some oregano. I love oregano, it's one of my favorite herbs. Okay, now we're gonna go ahead and crack some fresh pepper on there. Last but not least, we're gonna drizzle on our olive oil. Veggies are mixed up, they are looking good, and we are going to go ahead and transfer our spaghetti squash off of the cookie sheet onto our cutting board, and that way we have the cookie sheet free to roast the vegetables. So we're going to do a little flip-flop here. All right, we took the spaghetti squash off of the cookie sheet. Now we are going to go ahead and dump our veggies onto the roasting pan. I'm gonna go ahead and flatten them out. Okay, they're spread out evenly. This is now ready to go into our oven. We're gonna bake it at 425 for about 20 minutes until all the veggies are soft. Meantime, I'm going to go ahead and start shredding our spaghetti squash. See how it pulls apart nice and easily like that? You just have to stick a fork through and kind of push it away from the edge. I like to break it up so it doesn't all stick together. And when you do it this way, at least for me, I feel like it roasts quicker. It's easier to peel. I'm doing this with one hand, so it's a little slow, but it's easier to peel. And you can keep it in long strands so it kind of has the texture of angel hair pasta. See that? I'm going to do the same thing with all the rest of the squash. We're going to shred it and add it into our bowl and wait for the vegetables to be done roasting. Okay, I know it looks like a mess, but we've got all of the spaghetti squash peeled out. I scraped what I could off of the ends. It's all in my bowl, and then I just continue to kind of break it up with my fork just to make sure it gives us nice spaghetti-like strands instead of clumps. Okay, it's looking good. While the vegetables are finished roasting, I'm gonna go ahead and grate up some Parm cheese. You guys know I love my bees wrap. I always wrap my cheese in it. It keeps it fresh, it's really great. And then I'm gonna use the thick grate on my cheese grater for the cheese. Okay, so we have probably about 2 cups of grated Parm here. And when our roasted vegetables are done, we're gonna mix them with the spaghetti squash, and the heat of the vegetables will melt the cheese as we're mixing it together in our bowl. All right, our vegetables are done roasting. They're looking really yummy. As you can see, the tomatoes have started to kind of peel a little bit. You can tell they're getting roasted. You want this, so this is a good thing. If you move the vegetables around, you can see there is some liquid at the bottom of your pan. That's from these tomatoes popping open as they are cooking. That's going to be the sauce that coats your spaghetti squash. So leave that in there. It's going to be really good. I promise you. We're going to slowly start to add these veggies into our spaghetti squash and sprinkle in the cheese to let it all melt together. All right, the vegetables are piled onto our spaghetti squash. Now I am going to take the pan and tip in all that extra juice. Next, we are going to take a handful of our Parmesan cheese, sprinkle it on there. Another little handful, and we're gonna mix it all together so that cheese slowly starts to melt. Okay. We mixed up all the veggies. You can see now we mixed it with our spaghetti squash. The Parmesan cheese is melting. We are now going to plate it into our bowl and get ready to serve. All right, we plated the pasta in our bowl. You can see down there that the tomatoes are creating a really nice sauce that your spaghetti squash is in. You've got all these nice vegetables. We are gonna go ahead and top it with the extra chopped basil and just a little bit of extra Parmesan cheese before you serve it. I hope you guys enjoy.